Hi everyone, I'm Kimberly Parsons, the owner of Hearth and Gnome, and in this afternoon's video I'm going to be talking to you about choosing instruments. I'll be talking about the flutes that are used by Waldorf families, but I'll also be talking about some other instruments that I get a lot of questions about frequently. So welcome to my home. You will likely hear or see my kids in the background. You may even see some of our menagerie. We have dogs and cats and gerbils and fish and even some chickens. If we see a chicken, we've got a big problem. They're not supposed to be in the house. But anyway, welcome to my home. It's been a kind of it's been a honey in my hair kind of day, and that isn't a cute Southern saying or a euphemism. I really do have honey in my hair. We've just had a day here, so I appreciate you taking the time to check into this video, whether you're watching live or you're watching later on the replay. I'm going to endeavor to keep my videos between 15 and 20 minutes. That helps later with uploading. Hi, Lisa. And also, I think it's a better use of your time. I know a lot of you are parents or caregivers of children at home, and I know that your time is really precious and that you don't get a whole lot of it to yourself to sit down and watch a video or eat a secret snack. And so I'm going to work to keep these videos a little shorter than last week's video. So welcome, and just for those of you who are just new to Hearth and Gnome, I am a homeschooling mom of 2 kids, and we use a Waldorf-inspired program. And I'm also a working musician. I teach, I perform, and I co-wrote a curriculum for Waldorf families called Music Unfolds with Melissa Nelson of Waldorf Essentials. And I've since put out some other curriculums for people following a more traditional path. And so here I am. I'm live and on the internet, and trying to provide videos for people that would like some more help with bringing music to the children in their life, whether that's people who are teaching in a small school setting, or people who are teaching in a homeschool co-op, or people who are doing it at home on their own. So today when I'm talking about choosing instruments, I'm going to be talking about 2 things. I'm going to be talking about choosing flutes and recorders, which is what Waldorf families are most interested in most often. But I'm also going to be answering questions about other instruments that I get a lot of questions about frequently from other families. So, and I want to be clear too that while I am talking about specific brands or types or styles of instruments, this is less of a product showcase and more getting you to think through the ideas and motivations of what it is that you should be thinking about when you're choosing instruments for your children or the children that you teach. If you're interested in hearing more of the specific instruments and what they sound like, I have a video for that. It's called Instrument Parade, and you can find that on my website at hearthandgnome.com. And I'll be referring to that in some other videos too. But this is less of a show and tell as it is kind of helping you through the process of making those choices. So let's start with flutes and recorders. Waldorf families are very interested in that. It's part of the Waldorf curriculum. And the overlying and overarching theme as you're choosing an instrument is that it's all about the breath. It is a blown instrument, and Steiner wanted children to have that experience of playing a blown instrument specifically because he believed that playing a blown instrument was the closest extension of the child having experience of they themselves creating that music with the breath. It was something more than pounding keys on a piano or beating drums with implements or even with the hand, but that their breath, their inspiration, the core of their being was creating that sound. So when you're considering which of the many instrument choices that we have to bring to your kids, we're going to start with talking about that breath and which ones possibly give your children the closest experience to a natural exhalation when they're playing. So in my opinion, remember this is my opinion. I know many others that share parts of my opinion, people that will disagree. I am okay with that. I'm too old to think that everybody in the world is always going to agree with me. So this is my opinion. But in my opinion, the choroi flutes, which is CHOROI, if you're new and haven't seen that on the forums, I believe that those are the closest that we can get to a natural exhalation. So that when you're playing, the way you play the choroi is it really is very much like you put your mouth on it and go, and that's that's as close as you're gonna get. It's less of a blowing as it is an exhale. So if you're looking for one that's the closest to the natural breath, then you're gonna wanna start with a Colroy. The next choice for me is that the recorder. Now the recorder is bored, B-O-R-E-D. It's a board shaft, and so not that it's bored, not that kind of board. It's going to have a different feeling, and it is closer to actually blowing. It is a you have to blow into the recorder. You can't just exhale, or you're going to not get a very aesthetically pleasing sound out of a recorder. But that would be my second choice. I also get asked about the penny whistle a lot. The penny whistle requires a much more focused breath, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I just prefer the Colroy or the recorder to something that has a more forceful breath, like the penny whistle. You can use penny whistle, and lots of people do. There's some lovely programs that rely on it, and you can use penny whistle with Music Unfolds. But if we're talking just about which instruments give the closest experience to a natural exhalation, I would go with a Colroy. The next thing you want to consider is the warmth of the instrument, and warmth is something that's a real key component to Steiner's ideas about, especially with the young child, and as we grow and nurturing the child with warmth. And he meant that literally and metaphorically. And so it's my opinion that the warmest choice would be an instrument that's made of wood, and that those instruments made of metal and plastic are less warm. They're less warm in the hand, they're less warm in the mouth. So those are some of those very deep feeling. I used woo in my last video, and again, I don't mean that in an insulting way. I just mean it's something above thinking. It's something, it's an intuitive kind of thing. So I think that those instruments, again, we're looking at wood as the warmest choice. Some other things that you're going to want to consider once we get beyond thinking about which one is closest to a natural exhalation, which one is warmest in sound and in feeling. The next thing that you may want to consider is how they fit the hand. I want to show you a recorder. I'll show you, and I'll talk about these later. The recorder that I have here, this is kind of hard to show you, but all the holes are flat. These are cut out a little bit, but you can see that they're just even with the surface of the instrument. There's not really any help there for little fingers finding those holes or finding those places. The Colroy instruments, however, are different, and they do have that there. In fact, you can notice that they're not even evenly spaced. You notice this one's bumped out a little bit, and that one's bumped back. And the reason is that fits the hand better. That fits the natural arc of the fingers on the instrument. And you notice there's also where it's indented. It's hard to see on these videos, but you can see where it's going to fit the hand a little better. And whether you're using a pentatonic or a diatonic instrument, the Colroy do that very nicely for fitting the hand, which is something you really do want to think about if you're starting at 7 and your child maybe is on the tiny side, that you may need to think about how that's going to fit their hand. You're also going to want to think about how it fits the mouth. So the Colroy mouthpiece is, nicely beveled there, and I feel like it fits the mouth. This is called a tone block, and it has to do with, I think it has to do with the tuning and things like that. Newer Colroy do not all have these, but I'll talk about why I chose these later. And then of course the recorder, I'll pull out one of our trusty plastic ones. Yes, we have plastic ones. I'll talk about that in a minute too. You can see it's not just beveled back, that it actually is scooped out there like that. So you may prefer, especially if you had a traditional music education and did recorders in 5th grade or 6th grade. A lot of American public schools do that. You may just be more comfortable with how the recorder fits the mouth, but that's something to think about. The next question I get asked a lot is about tuning. There's a long explanation in my book, Music Unfolds. Well, it's not long, it was as brief as we could make it, about whether you should choose 440 hertz or 432 hertz. And that has to refer to the frequency of the note A. I know some of you have lost me already, and that's okay. I'm going to move on in a second, but people get very concerned about which tuning should I use. And I kind of think that there are all kinds of reasons, and it's not just Waldorf people. There's a debate among traditionally schooled musicians too as to which tuning is correct. I don't have a strong opinion about it, but I do have a strong opinion about if you're going to be playing in a group. If you're going to be playing in a group, you need to match. So because my children and I play with other people, and I actually play my instruments at church with our piano that's tuned to 440. My instruments are 440, so that's the more standard tuning. And are most people going to notice it? But if you are interested in that, that's something to consider. Are you going to be playing with other groups of people? If so, what are those groups tuning to? So if you're going to be using flutes or recorders at your co-op, then you all need to have either 432 or 440 if at all possible, so that it all matches. It's really just a very slight difference that most people can't detect, but it's there. So it's something to think about. The other thing when we're talking about tuning is you'll see some people try and get instruments off of Etsy, like, and I'm not talking about buying a Koroi flute off of I'm sorry, eBay, not Etsy, eBay, and they'll try to get these flutes that people have made, maybe they're indigenous peoples or things that have made different flutes, and they ask me, you know, what key does it need to be in, or what key is my flute in? I can't do that. I mean, that's wow. I can't be checking out instruments on eBay, but you need to ask the maker the notes that you need to play. Need a pentatonic music, need a music and Music Unfolds, or that are in any of the curriculums of which I'm aware. It needs to be able to play a low E, a low D. I'm looking at my notes because I get nervous when I'm live. A G, A, B, and a high D and a high E. So some people will say that's in D. Music people, you're going, that's not in D, that's in G. Just make sure that it can play those notes. The next question I get asked a lot about is whether you should get German or Baroque fingering. I'm not going to address that in this video because I have one about that, and it's called German versus Baroque fingering. You can find that on my website, hearthandgnome.com. But basically, this is what I tell people. It doesn't matter for a really long time because it only affects F sharp, which you don't get to for a really long time, and then high G. So it won't affect you, won't affect your kids. And in fact, we have, I had ordered a bunch of plastic recorders for a class, and there was one random Baroque recorder in the bunch. All the rest were German, and then there was this one Baroque one. We didn't even notice until, I don't know, I think I'd had them a couple of years. And then I was looking at the back, and I was like, oh, it was Baroque. So if you're playing pentatonic music, it won't matter. And by the time it matters, your kid will have the dexterity to deal with that. Just make sure that you both have the same kind, that, you know, when you're teaching this at home or in a group, you're also playing, your instrument needs to match what your kids are matching, so that when you do get to F sharp, you're showing them the same fingering that they have on their instrument. Then of course you want to consider the sound. Is it aesthetically pleasing? I'm not gonna lie, a plastic recorder does not sound as nice as one of my wooden recorders. It doesn't sound as nice as the Koroi. It doesn't. So that's something that you're gonna want to consider. Can you get a nice sound out of it? Absolutely, absolutely you can get a nice sound out of a plastic recorder, but it is something to think about. If you want to hear what those sound like, again, check out my video Instrument Parade on the website. Another thing about that you want to consider is the cost. And you know, the nicer the instrument, the higher the cost. You can find, especially the Koroi at this time of year, hint hint, you can find them used on a lot of the forums, but buyer beware. Sometimes you're not sure what you're getting. And there is, Koroi does sell one that's got the Koroi fingering. And the best thing I can tell you is that if you're buying a pentatonic one, it will have 5 holes on the front. This is the pentatonic Koroi, and then it has the back hole here. And if you're trying to figure out tuning, I believe that Koroi did not even offer a 432 hertz when they with the tone block. So if you find one used that has 5 holes and a tone block, chances are you're looking at a 440 hertz pentatonic Koroi. The diatonics are a little trickier if you're going to buy those used. You know, and one thing to consider too is you don't know about, I mean, people always think of the germs, but you also don't know how well they maintain them. These things need to be oiled periodically. They need to be cleaned of moisture. So you don't know how well the person has maintained it. That's just something to consider. Again, here's the diatonic. Ours happen to be German fingering, and you can see that it has 7 holes across the front and 1 in the back. This one has the tone block, so this is a 440. This is one that we bought used. So you can get them used, but buyer beware. You just have to be careful. And I can't be checking out flutes for you online. That's just not a responsibility that I want to take. So just you have to be very careful. There are some great shops also online that offer these in the States, so that's something to think about. Another option, and it can be more costly, but when you look at it in the long run, it's not. This is the Kunath, and I'm saying it Kunath because it's German, Kunath. It's a German company, and this was a flute. They developed a flute for use in Waldorf schools, but it hasn't really taken off on this side of the pond, but in Europe. And what I like about it is it is a recorder board. This is the head joint, and then this is a marvelous thing. Look, okay, so this is the pentatonic part, right? Fewer holes, and you see it's got little divots there for the resting fingers. So this is the pentatonic. I put it together, play pentatonic, but look here. I love this. Magic. Okay, so this is the diatonic body. Diatonic just means it has all the notes of the major scale. So more holes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 on the back. So I can keep this head joint, and I can just change out the body, which I do. So if I want to teach a group that's playing pentatonic, I can put this body on. If I'm teaching diatonic, I can switch over. I could do that for my own playing, whatever, you know, my own reasons are that day for what I want to play. There is only one vendor right now that has these, and once she's sold them, she's not selling more. I'll drop that link in the comments for you. But you can order them directly from Kunath. You just have to be willing to pay a little extra for shipping and customs and things like that. But you can order them and get them shipped to you, at least in the United States. It would help if you translate the webpage either with your browser or with someone who knows enough German to help you get out of trouble, because their webpage is in German. It's a German company, it's a German business. But I really like this. It's a great option. Instead of having to buy new flutes every year, then you can just keep the mouthpiece and pass down the bodies for the different things. So and the final thing that I really think you should think about when we're talking flutes is cleaning them. And here's where someone will want to come and take away my Waldorf hat. But I'm going to name drop. I've never met him or spoken to him in any length or anything, but I do happen to know that Eric Fairman uses plastic ones. At least he has at times in his classes, because these can be cleaned. And if you're dealing with any groups of children of any size, you're going to want to clean them. And I'm thinking about one class in particular. I had a child who was really just had for whatever reason, he wanted to stick this whole thing in his mouth, and he just slobbered that thing up like it was so much slobber. And after class, I was really glad that I could take these home and clean them ever so thoroughly. And you know, I'm not going to make any recommendations on how you treat your wooden flutes, because that makes me nervous. But you know, people clean them with thieves oil. People, you know, allow them to dry out thoroughly, not in the sun, not with heat. But you know, you can get those clean too. But as far as really making sure it's clean, plastic is the way to go. So you know, when we're talking about flutes, if you want a good middle grade instrument that's right in the middle of the road, I really like this flute that I showed you earlier. This is a recorder. This is a Hohner, Hohner, and it's just a pear wood soprano recorder. This one is several years old. I don't like the lacquer. I wish it was more of a natural finish, and you can see one of the kids took a chip out of it. Either that or could have been a dog, I don't know. But I like it. It's got a great sound and whatever. You can hear it in the other video. It's about $35, whereas a Colroy new is going to run you between $100 and $125. The Kunath new, depending on shipping and all that kind of thing, is going to be right around the same as a Colroy. And then of course the plastic recorder that you can get on Amazon, about $8. And I just want to say, I will never take someone's Waldorf head away. I really admire anybody who is wanting to bring music to their children or to a group of children. And if what you can afford is plastic, then you go buy one and you play it with pride, and you play it with joy, and you play it as beautifully as you can, because there's a lot of inequity in the world, and not everybody can go buy a wooden instrument. Some people that's not within their means, and some people it's not among their priorities. So I fully support the plastic recorder players. Rock on with your bad self. You have my support. So let's move on to the other instruments, though, because this is kind of some people have already made their decisions about flutes and recorders, and I want to talk about those. I'm running at 20 minutes. So much for being short. When we're talking about other instruments, the guiding thought should be, how closely do you want to follow Steiner's indications? And that's not a judgy McJudgerton question. That's just a great starting point. How important is that to you? How fully vested are you in that? If you're fully vested in that and you want to do that all the way, then you will start your child at 7 on a pentatonic flute. And you will perhaps allow some little rhythm instruments. I'm talking like shaker bells or woodblocks, but for tonal color, not to beat out the rhythm, but to add a little, ting of loveliness, to add some feeling to that music, some expression to that music, rather than pound, pound, pound. That's what you will do. If you are fully vested, then you will stick with the pentatonic and no pounding out the rhythm until your child is about 9, when they will switch to a fully diatonic instrument, and we'll start working with rhythm and beat. That's when they start also to learn to read notation. Before then, it's all taught orally and aurally. If you're fully vested, then after about age of 10, that's when you would want to introduce them to the strings, to a choir experience where they're singing in harmony and not just singing in unison, and perhaps to the piano. I kind of laugh when I read something that Steiner said or wrote about the piano. It makes him sound he's just not a fan. And in some ways he wasn't for the young child, because the piano is considered a rhythm instrument. It's part of the rhythm section in any ensemble, and that's confusing to people because they're thinking, but wait, it has a tune. But it's because of the way it's played. It's percussive. When you're pressing the keys of a keyboard, you're causing hammers to fall on strings. So it's part of the rhythm family, and it's an instrument that can be played very well, but completely without connection or feeling from the player, because you really can look at the black spots on the page and turn that into a musical piece, but it doesn't necessarily require that deeper connection that Steiner felt came from playing a blown instrument, where the music is actually created by the breath of the person playing it. So if you're fully vested, that's what you'll do. But I also think we have to consider your family culture. And what I mean is this: what really, this is my opinion, and I'm sure someone somewhere will come out of somewhere and try to take away my Waldorf hat, but whatever. I've heard a lot of discussion, especially in forums for makers, people who are making goods. They sew, they weave, they carve, they do a lot of woodworking and things, and of course their children are also interested in these things. So one of the themes I see come out from all sorts of places is people say, well, hey, that's a natural impulse for your child, and perhaps you could do a gentle introduction to that, because that's part of what your family does. You're not taking this outside thing that they've never seen or experienced or shown an interest in and forcing them into it. You are taking something that's a natural impulse from the environment in which they are growing and thriving, and allowing them to explore that. So, in our family, my kids have had some experiences that are unusual. They're not unusual for a musician's family, but they might be unusual for yours. My youngest son has been doing gigs with me since he was a week old. Our congregation at that time had a service that I needed to cover, and so I was feeling well, and I put him in his little, I tied him on and off we went, and I played and sang and did the thing that needed doing. So he's been doing that since he was 7 days old. He had his first mama's paid gig was when he was 2 weeks old. He had to come with me. I was contracted with one of our local public schools to teach some voice lessons in preparation for a huge contest they had coming up. I couldn't not do that, so I just tied him on and off we went. So he's been doing things like that for forever. Both of my children when they were very small, I mean, they would make a camp under the piano or under the podium or under the pew, and they would sit there, and they are very good at that. They're very used to it. They have heard innumerable lessons, rehearsals, concerts, all of those kinds of things, because that's what we do. So we've made some different choices along the route than the family whose kids are not exposed to that. I have some customers that use my materials, same kind of thing, where their family is very into folk strings. I've got 2 families like that. That's what they do, and that's who they are. That's very much part of their family culture. So when you're deciding, what other instruments you might introduce to your children, you have to consider that. To clarify, Waldorf is not child-led. So I'm not talking about your 4-year-old has decided that it's his life's ambition to play the electric guitar, and you play the electric guitar, and so now your 4-year-old needs to play it. I don't necessarily mean that. We do have to make some choices for our children. At least I think so, and that's kind of what Waldorf education is about, is guiding them in their choices and their affinities. Because my kids are interested in all kinds of things that I have made the choice that that's not something they're going to develop at this time in their lives. So just that little caveat I wanted to throw in. So let's talk about those individual instruments again. This is my personal opinion. I get asked about piano. This is a really tricky one because the typical pedagogy, the typical piano teacher begins at his very beginning, start lesson 1 with dividing the beat. And if you're a Waldorf family and you're trying to follow Steiner's pedagogy, that's a sticky wicket. So it also begins right away with using alphabet names for notes. Most or many teachers do, and it's very heady. So me personally, I would suggest waiting till 9 in most cases. I will say that I do really like Faber. The Faber series has a wonderful starter curriculum called My First Piano Adventures, and it's 3 little books that are really kind of primer books. The first one is yellow, and that's a good introduction for, if that's your family culture and you've got a child that has an aptitude or an interest or both, that's a good starting place. That's kind of a more gentle introduction, but piano can be tricky. So me personally, if you're really trying to stick with a Waldorf way of doing things, a Steiner way of doing things, and you're going to wait till 9 or 10 for that, and unless your child is a savant, it'll be okay. I get asked about strings. Strings is less tricky because there are a lot more Suzuki educators out there for strings, and I think Suzuki's a great way to go. We have a Suzuki school, but it's over an hour away for us, so it's not really a practical option right now. But I think strings, if that's your family culture and you've got a kid with an aptitude or an interest, I think strings is a little easier to do in a way that's more compatible with Steiner and things like that. Especially as the families that are using my materials are doing, they're already steeped in a folk culture. It's already based on singing. It's already based on the music of their other people. So I think that that's really consistent with what Steiner wanted for kids as they ventured, into the world of music. I get asked about guitar. I kind of think a lot of the people that I get that ask me about guitar, they're talking about very young children, and I really think dexterity is going to be a big issue. It's not as easy as it looks to play the guitar well, and it depending on the size of the instrument that you get, depending on the skill of your teacher, you want them to have facility with the hand, and especially since the left hand is doing the really heavy lifting, and most children are not left-handed, I think you're going to run into some dexterity issues there before you go out and invest in a guitar. and sometimes too, when people take guitar, unless they're taking from a bona fide guitar teacher, of which I know many that are teaching just really great skills and musical things that you need to learn, not just playing, oh, here's a chord, play this. You're going to skip over some of the things that you want your child to learn in music, as far as music reading and things like that. Not all, but you need to just ask the teacher if that's a choice that you're going to make. And the last one I want to talk about is I get asked about drums all the time, which I think is kind of funny, to ask the Waldorf flute person about drums. But people ask, should I let my 6-year-old play drums? And I feel like we just need to say no to drums. And I have all kinds of reasons. I don't mean for forever, but I really, as a musician, as a music teacher, as doing all of this stuff, I really feel like our kids need to experience melody, and drums just don't have it. And also, you're asking a lot, coordination wise. If you're talking about, playing a drum set, that's kind of intense. And I know they don't put all the pieces together at first, that they just use a few. And then just one funny thing that's just kind of very much my own personal opinion. There's just kind of a running joke in about drummers that they're either too fast or too slow, but everybody kind of has to cave to the drummer, unless you've got a really good one. And I've known some really good drummers in my life, I have. But that's kind of the running joke, and it's a joke for a reason. It's a cliche for a reason. And so I feel like, if you want your child to learn a musical instrument because you want them to learn discipline and you want them to learn elements of music, one of the elements of music, first of all, is melody. So you're going to want your child to learn a melody instrument, but you also want them to learn something where they're not driving the bus. So, if they are playing a wind instrument in an ensemble, or they're playing piano or strings or even guitar, there's more of an ensemble thing, whereas the drummer is just kind of in his own world. And I think drums is a great thing. I have several friends that are professional percussionists, and they're excellent, and they play well in an ensemble, and they've got great musical chops and knowledge. But I think that's something that should wait until later. 4-year-olds just don't need a drum set, and parents of 4-year-olds don't need a drum set either, in my humble, unsolicited, but highly accurate opinion. So I just say wait on the drums. So that last bit, all that is just my opinion, and everyone has one, and that is mine. I hope that this has helped you a little bit today. I went a little longer than I thought I would, but I appreciate you spending your time with me today. You can always reach me at hearthandgnome.com. If you're interested in a Steiner approach for teaching singing and flute and reading and notation, which begins in 3rd grade, then you're going to want to check out Music Unfolds. There's a section in there on choosing instruments, on some of the things I talked about today regarding fingering. It does include the fingering chart for German fingering, and it's all there for your use and hopefully your benefit as well. So that's at hearthandgnome.com. If you have some questions that you'd like to ask me, please send me an email. You can email me at kimberly@hearthandgnome.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for spending part of your busy day with me. Bye.